Hey there, guys. We're going to be going back to the Ghast fight for a little bit of a cheaper clear. This is for those of you that can't just like turn one OTK with Richt or something. So we're going to be going back with a water team. And we're going to be using very cheap gear, mostly older units, etc, etc. So this is the party you can go with. The party is very, very flexible. I'll talk about gear swaps and unit swaps at the end of the video. But for now, we're going to be using Tifa to deal water damage and then Reagan to deal extra water damage. Honestly speaking, Tifa caps it all by herself, but in case your gear is not quite as good, we're going to use Reagan to give some extra damage. We're going to use Cecil to cover, and then Zahn is going to steal Cecil's killer for the party. We're going to break with Laguna, and we're going to use Nicole for water support. So let's get in here and do it. So this boss, similar to the final boss, has a field you kind of have to remove because the field is a really big buff on the boss. The 10% field, but that basically lowers your break from 89 to 79, and that would be really bad. So Cecil is starting in the shift form. That is critically important because on turn 1 we're going to LB, and we need him to be Omni covering on turn 1, which he is. Now his LB gives himself only a 200% undead killer, which we're now going to use Zahn to steal. So we're going to critical on Cecil and then share that with the party. Now Laguna, even if your Laguna is EX0, that's fine. We're going to use both his Magnuses and then kind of whatever. Tifa can use her shifted LB here. Nicole can use Flood. Then we're going to do imbue the party with water, and then elemental power water on Reagan. Now Reagan can just guard here. Okay, so the boss is going to do some AoE physical, AoE magic. He's also going to blind the party, and he's going to put up a field. Now that field really has to go. We're not going to worry about it yet. Now we did give Cecil Lakshmi synergy for the blind. If we didn't do that, or if he didn't counter, you can just panacea with Zahn this turn, no big deal. So Laguna will now do his LB. Even if you're EX0, the Magnus last turn would have filled it to the maximum, so you can LB on turn 2 no matter what. Nicole will also LB this turn. Reagan will do his cooldown for modifier buff. Tifa will do all her Magnuses, including her 150 Amplify. And then Cecil can just Omni cover yet again to ignore all the stuff the boss does. So the boss is going to be doing, again, AoE physical, AoE magic. Also poison this turn. We don't really care about poison. If it stays, great. If not, or if we counter cure it, great. We did. You know, kind of whatever. Okay, now it's time to kill the boss. First of all, Nicole will do the field to get rid of the boss's field. Now, Reagan, if you'll notice here, the boss is at 89 break, negative 230 water resist. We're at 500 killer, and we got a small gun in peril from Laguna, which we are using a gun on him. So we're going to LB Reagan. Cecil has to go to the base form so that we don't, so that we can chain. The boss is immune to magic, and his shift form is magical chaining. So we got to go to the base form to support Absolute Mirror of Equity chain with Cecil to match up to Reagan. Laguna, if you're at EX3, you can SLB. It's triple bolting strike. But to show you that we don't need EX3 Laguna, we're going to just triple bolting normally. But if you are EX3, use the SLB. Zahn will support chain with bolting strike. Nope, it's not bolting strike. Hold on. Zahn will support chain with bolting strike. Somewhere in here. There it is. And then Tifa will use her LB to cap. So there we're going to go. We're going to go ahead and chain that up. That should be the 100 count chain score, and it should also be a 4 billion damage or better. So let's see what kind of damage we did. Honestly, Tifa probably did 4 billion by herself, but again, we added Reagan just for a little bit of extra. So we did the 100 count chain score, and we did 7.6, almost double overcap with very cheap gear, not using stuff like Titus STMR, etc. I'll show you the gear in a second, and I'll talk about some potential unit swaps for you. Okay, so that is a perfect score on the Ghast. Like I said, all you really need is Tifa. 5.4 right there. Reagan did 2 to help out a little bit, but it really is just the Tifa show right here. So there you go. Let me go ahead and show you the gear, and we'll discuss some potential unit swaps if you don't have these units. So as far as Nicole goes, if you don't have him, You could do an ice party, and you could bring Moogle of Narshi Mog. You would also want to bring, if you're doing an ice party, you would drop Laguna, you would drop Nicole, you would use Frievia to imbue and amplify ice. She could also be your breaker. Only 88 break, it should be fine though. And then you could drop Nicole for Moogle of Narshi Mog. Frievia would do the Sword in Peril. You would swap Reagan to a sword. There's some swaps for that. If you don't have Cecil, you can use Esther. Esther can Omni cover. The problem with Esther is she only has 135 Reaper Killer versus Cecil's 200. But if you're bringing Esther, you don't need Zahn to steal the killer. So you could bring Esther instead and swap out Zahn for Rosa. Rosa would give you a 250 Reaper Killer. You could also swap it out for something like Yuna for 160, etc., stuff like that. If you don't have Tifa, just your best damage dealer, for example, Richt, easily overcaps it. You could also use things like, what are some other good physical imbuable DPS these days? You could go off element with like Flaring Rain or something, because this party really doesn't even have a leader skill. So something like Flaring Rain going off element would still easily cap this. You get the idea. Just damage is all you really need. So here's the party and what we use. So Nicole, honestly, just some status immunity, not even important, honestly. Mana reduction, a little bit of Esper fill, and whatever otherwise. Reagan is using a gun build, and again, we're trying to use very cheap gear. We're not using a lot of Clash gear. We're not using things like a lot of STMRs from either Limited or NVs. We're trying to keep it very cheap. This is all either free gear or event gear or 5-star gear. So there you go. A lot of whatever stuff, equip gun, etc. A super cheap card that you can get from the token shop. And he's maxed on everything. Maxed LB damage, maxed Reaper Killer. Also, he has no leader skill at all in this party. So, yay. Red Wing Cecil, we only use the shift form. So he's full evasion. You don't need provoke because he's omni covering anyway. And we gave him Lakshmi synergies just to counterattack. That's not required. We use Zahn to Panacea anyway, but whatever. Honestly, he's here mostly because his LB, as you can see, is a self-only 200% Reaper Killer, and that makes it very nice. Laguna, just an 89 break and a big Water in Peril. I geared him for damage. I forgot the damage breakdown. Because we didn't use the SOB, I'm sure the damage was garbage. But geared for damage, technically speaking, I wish I'd remembered to look at the damage breakdown because I'm sure it was very low. But honestly, he's here just for the break. Also, he does a Gun in Peril for our Reagan. So 25 Gun in Peril. If we had done the SLB, which we could have done with this party, it would have been 35. But I didn't want to rely on EX3. Zahn is just honestly whatever, a little bit of Esper fill. Crimson Butterfly, so we can multicast. Other than that, whatever. You don't need a vision card on him. And then Tifa in the shift form, we're not using things like Titus STMR. That would obviously boost your damage a whole lot more if you do own it. I didn't want to rely on that. So we can do a dual wield build on her because now we have the chain cap passive on her. Other than that, cheap gear, not using Clash stuff, dual wield, etc. Her own card. And she's maxed and everything. And there's the budget run for the Ghast. Not strictly budget, but definitely a lot cheaper than my other clear where this OTK is on turn 1. Which you can still use if you want to. Anyway, see you in a bit.